Hey everyone, it's Raghu. I'm back again with Mindrolling, and I'm with Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, who God, you guys got to know that I have spoken about. We've had a wonderful podcast a couple of years ago. Well, it's actually more 3 years ago, maybe, huh? Yeah, something
Um,
like that.
One was maybe about a year and a half, and another one about 3 years
Oh
ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Welcome, anyhow. Welcome
Thank
again.
you. Thank you. It's a joy to be back.
So then many of you do know, and I would suggest this right away. I mean, I get a poem a day from Rosemerry. I joined up onto the list, and it is a phenomenal way to have your day start because that's when I see it. So now we have this. Is this the first book of poetry that you put out? No, right?
Oh, it's there've been quite a few.
Oh, quite a few. How
Yeah,
come
and
I'm not
maybe
that aware? I'm only aware of one other.
there's probably about more than a dozen.
Really? Oh.
Mm,
Are they on your website?
they are. Yeah, you
Okay. All
can.
right. So
Yeah.
we'll give everybody that information for sure when that happens. But you know what? Let's start at for me, yeah, just reading the beginning of the book. So I guess really to set this all in a way that it really reflects what you're sharing in this poetry. One of the main things for me, because it reflects back on my own day-to-day practice, and that's what's so amazing about it. So, but to set this up, I think you have to talk about the tragedy that happened in your life with your son.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. So the Unfolding is the new book, and all of these poems have been written in the last 3 years since my son died. His name was Finn Tilo Trommer, and he chose to take his life. It was in August, just before his 17th birthday. And shortly after that, my father died just 3 months after that. So it was a season of extreme grief, of just more than anything, Raghu. And I think back to that time, I mostly remember how I just felt like I had no agency at all to do anything, and that all of that I was being lived, so that things kept happening, but they weren't because of me. And that was a remarkable experience, to be sure. Almost utterly untethered, though, and very disorienting. And it was, it was awful. It was awful.
Hmm.
And it is relentlessly awful and sad, the loss of Finn,
Hmm.
especially, and my father. So um I say in the book that it's written in the key of grief, which is just to say that these poems have all come out of a time that is deeply steeped in grief. um I also say that though that would be the key, that the melody would
Hmm.
be praise. And
Hmm.
I think of Rilke, who said that this was what we were here to do, that our work is to meet what is most difficult in our lives and still praise.
Hmm. Well, I want to read just a little something that sets up what you shared just now. Um, 3 years later, and you're referring to his death, there's an invitation to say yes to the world as it inspires every poem in this collection. The call to accept our vulnerability, to be curious, to open ourselves to love, to dwell more fully in the body, to feel how ephemeral all of our epiphanies are. to live into the blank pages of our lives where new poems wait to be written, to praise what is, to be in service to the continual unfolding that is the nature of, well, everything. So that really speaks to it. I mean, maybe also in this crazy world that we live in, where the attention span is less than zero, and the distractions are humongous. It's I don't know. You, I think, are doing some of the work to introduce this into next gen's life, in schools and so on.
Oh, yeah.
Because that seems absolutely necessary for people to understand the gift of a poem. Could you speak to that? What that gift is, and it has to be a little bit more meaningful, I think, to next gen.
What is the gift of a poem? I think this is true. I mean, I think I'll speak for me. I know that part of what a poem does for me is it, both in the reading and in the writing of a poem, is a ongoing invitation to be curious, to wonder, to see the world in a new way, right? To see what we think we know about the world, and then to see it reframed. And that, maybe the joy of that, Raghu, is that it's playful, that it can be very playful. It of course can also touch on the most devastating things and the most difficult things. I mean, I think about what it's like to be alive right now and how supercharged it is, how much we other each other, how difficult it is to see that we have anything in common, and somehow a longing to disparage the other. Maybe one of the most important things a poem has to offer us then is this idea. I'm just thinking of this right now. A poem desperately wants to have opposition in it, because life is full of opposition, and the poem, more than anything, wants to talk about what does it mean to be alive. And in the poem, this works really well, right? We always have, if there's not going to be opposition in a poem, the poem will be boring. We won't remember it instantly. But a successful poem is going to have enough tension in it that we feel this tug of opposites and how they coexist. In fact, how they need each other, how desperately they need each other. And boy, isn't that what somehow we forgot that part, in our day-to-day lives, as we look at the other, and instead of saying, I need you, you have something I need, we push it away. So even if it's just that, even if it was just that part that we could extend to, well, to all of us, really, to myself, to you, to younger people, to older, like to any of us, just to how do we reconcile this vast expanse of possibility, these things that seem like utter opposites, and see that what a dance it is between them, how essential they both are. And I'm thinking, I was just yesterday in an 11th grade classroom too.
Oh, you're kidding. That's cool.
And they terrify me. It terrifies me every time I go to see the high school. They can be so indifferent and cool.
These are like freshmen and
they were all juniors. They were juniors.
Uh-huh.
And it was, well, it was. They started out a little cool, but it was so fun then to watch them open a little bit, to play. My goal with them was really just to play, to help them think, oh, poetry, that there's something to it. I like this. And I pulled some of my very favorite poems, Things That You Missed When You Were Absent That Day in Fourth Grade by Brad Aaron Modlin, or there's several. So it was just fun to read these poems with these kids and watch them get it. And then we created a poem, by the way, in which we created, what did you miss that day? And what do you wish you knew now, that if you'd only been at school instead of skiing that day in fourth grade, or instead of being sick, what could you have learned? And the first thing that one of the girls said just opened me up so beautifully. She said that she would have liked to have learned how to be nice to her sister. Right? Maybe that's at the heart of what I was just saying too, is this, how could poetry, which is really a dance of oppositions open us up to how do we treat each other, especially the people who are most difficult for us to want to connect with sometimes.
Yeah. And it's a path really inward, helping to do what we all would like to do, which is transform, the voice in our head, self-centered voice in our head, transform that into our hearts, which is what Ram Dass's work was all about all these decades. And there's a resonation that happens with music. This is my thing about what poetry can be. And it's beyond rational thought. I mean, a great poem just sends you beyond that into an intuitive understanding. So that's why I think it's really, truly important. I mean, when I was around their age, I guess, these 11th graders, maybe a little older, but right around there, Leonard Cohen was my hero. I mean, I'm from Montreal, so was he. We had a lot of cross connection, through this family and friends. But I always remember how important it was. I mean, and not less than he, of course, was Bob Dylan.
Right.
And those two people saved my ass, really. I mean,
yeah, I think a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of people. But I only cared about me in that moment. So, yeah, I would just say this is a great thing to share with anybody. When which I do, like when I get one of your poems, and I'll send it to my partner. Oh, did you get this? I was subscribed. I don't know why I didn't get it. So here you go. So yeah, I think it's of real value for people to have that kind of curiosity. What is this? Rather than, shit, I got to go to school. What is it? They're going to do a poetry part of my literature class, that kind of stuff. How about a poem? How about a poem? Do you have the poem? Would you want to read it? I could suggest to you what
Sure. Why don't you suggest one?
Yeah. Okay. Since we're talking about, of course, one of the main themes in the book is dealing with grief. You have so many great poems about that. Let me see.
Well, you're looking, it just occurs to me that those students that I was with yesterday were the age he was when he died. Funny. Yeah.
Oh, wow. How about the Grand Quilt, which is on page 57?
Right. So I'm glad you chose this poem. The book itself is split up into 4 sections, and this one leads out the 3rd section. Each of the sections are words that I made up, which was just because it's fun, but also because it felt necessary. I think that the heart of this book, like I said earlier, is how do we show up for these very different, difficult, oppositional feelings at the same time? For instance, grief and joy, or in the case of this poem, maybe beauty and things that we'd rather push away. And this is the lead poem in a chapter that's called Some Union. Some is the Proto-Indo-European root, which means to sing, and union, coming together. And this idea that there is this possibility of finding praise when things come together, how desperately we need each other, even though sometimes it's something we'd rather not show up with. So this is the Grand Quilt. I don't believe we can stitch together only scraps of beauty, squares of light. I don't believe in a quilt that doesn't also have patches of sorrow. blocks of ache. Such pieces are, of course, much harder to want to stitch in, but it matters that we do not exclude them. It matters right now that we don't pretend they do not exist. It matters that we sew every piece into the grand cloth. It matters, too, how we sew these pieces in. Perhaps using our finest silk thread, perhaps with an elaborate stitch our grandmother taught us, or perhaps we must use a stitch we make up, because no one ever taught us how to do this most difficult task, to meet what at first seems unwanted, wrong, and to incorporate it into the whole, and to do this for as long as we can stitch. That's how long.
Mm. Yeah, this is a little bit wacky, but maybe not that much. There is a Buddhist practice, and this incredible teacher she unfortunately doesn't stay there much anymore. Lama Tsultrim Alioni is was in southern Colorado.
Yeah, not far from where I live.
Yeah, and she had a book called Feeding the Demons, right? This poem is what she was talking about, or what the practice is, which is in inviting, identifying unwanted things and inviting them in to share a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And and basically weave that into the fabric of one's life, which is what this poem is saying. So it's not that far.
I think it's exactly the same thing. Or, not so different, I suppose, from Rumi's guest house, where he's inviting all of it in. Yeah. Just kind of building on that kind of language that you were using.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel, though, that obviously this, the whole Be Here Now network and the podcasts are about consciousness one way or the other. They have, some other stuff as well. But so there's a real purpose to help, especially with what I do with Mindrolling, help us all on a day-to-day basis to be able to use tools to transform one's life, practices, and so on. And I do think this is, that's a silly thing to say, but certainly this can be a practice. How do you see that? And not just the practice of hearing, but also the practice of actually creating and what that happens in that process.
Yeah. Isn't that a good question? My first thought is that these invitations are everywhere. It's just a matter of picking them up and seeing them, right? Just whenever, and that invitation is probably whenever we're annoyed, whenever we're frustrated, whenever we think that person is wrong. That's a really big invitation, I think. So then practically how to do that? I don't know. I'm gonna first of all say this is a practice. But I can think of one kind of strong example I have in my own life where I had this idea that other people, besides people like me, other people would drive a Ford. Those other people, I had a whole persona for them about how they might vote and how they might be different in the world than I was. I'd created a whole thing about it.
Yes. Stories, one of our many stories.
Right. By the way, my parents drive Fords. I'm just going to put it out there.
Ford.
And Ford, forgive me, Ford, for saying anything about you like this. But then here's what I had. This is what I did. I went and got one. When my car stopped working, my fabulous Volvo, I thought, okay, this is it. like, this is your chance, Rosemerry, to really
No, you
show
really
up.
did that
I
based on
really
this?
did. I really did.
Wow.
Her name is Pearl. I adore, I love Pearl. I just can't say enough nice things about my Ford. It was a powerful thing because I had attached a lot of story, Raghu, to this other. And who did it affect? This little act, me buying the Ford to drive now, affects me. I'm the only one it affects, truly, right? Well, maybe it's good for our economy, but really, it was a big thing in me to feel as if I was finding a way to, in the poem, it's like, how do we stitch these pieces together? And this was one of the ways I was like, okay, this is how you can stitch this piece together, Rosemerry. This is one way that you reach across what you think is a divide, and you find some kind of commonality, and you drive the same car as the people you think are the other. So it was.
That's great. I love that.
So this is a practical idea. I don't think it has to be as expensive as a car, but I think that it was, and this was a real commitment for me. Like, it wasn't something I took lightly. This was something that I really had to dig in and search around for. Yeah.
Wow, that's so great. Good for you. I mean, this is such a huge subject now, very obviously. But we're doing a couple of things. We're actually doing 10 days before the election. We are doing a course, which will be people online will get not just Ram Dass, but Jack Cornfield and Joseph Goldstein, all of our Sharon Sells, but all of our friends, Ram Dass's friends from way back in the day, very wise people. So, and then every day somebody's going to speak to that theme also, including Dr. Greg Boyle, amazing people. And it is about us and them, basically. That's not what it's called. Okay, but
there wouldn't be a bad name, though, by the way.
Centering in the Storm is what it's called, actually. So
that's a beautiful name.
Yeah, giving people a chance, giving us all a chance to be able to do maybe not something as outstanding as what you just did with your car, but something to at least think about and see that there is a way for us to understand. We are all interconnected, and whatever is happening that we don't like, we are part of that happening, and so on.
Yeah.
That's real fitting in terms of what this poem is. Okay, how about next? Page 44, The Medicine of Surrender. I feel like I got a prayer book here. Turn to page.
Well, that's good, because that way, when people get it, they'll know how to find it in their book.
Yeah, right. The Medicine of Surrender.
You helped me find it too. Thank you. I'll say that the title of this poem actually came from Mirabai Starr, who has such a fabulous online community called Holy Lament. And she every now and then offers writing prompts for people. So this was one of hers, The Medicine of Surrender, fill in the blank. So that was the genesis for this poem.
That's great. Yeah.
The medicine of surrender comes with no spoonful of sugar. No promises, no backup plans, no returns, no insurance. The medicine of surrender never tastes the way you expect, never tastes the same next time, seldom has the hoped for effect. And if there is some part of you that thinks it might not be affected, that thinks it might hold back, that part is most likely the first part to be flooded with the relentless truth of what is. Oh, surrender. The surest medicine that exists. There are infinite side effects: wonder, freedom, rawness. It's like opening the dictionary to the word heaven or obliteration and knowing it's the same thing. It's like playing spin the bottle with life and you French kiss whatever you get. It's the only remedy that can help you be whole. The only real medicine there is.
Oh. So in India, surrender is the biggest deal, in the Hindu practice, generally speaking. It's called Sharanagat, or
Sharanagat.
Sharanagati is someone who it's happening to. So Ram Dass had an Indian brother. His name was K.K. Shah. He would come to visit Ram Dass while he was alive in Maui, and he came, 3 or 4 times. Can't remember exactly. And he came before that to America, and he was so close to Ram Dass. He died 3 weeks after Ram Dass. Basically said, "That's it. I have no reason to be here." And I'm like, what? Anyhow, that's a whole other story. But one of the times that he came, he talked about surrender to us. And he basically said, "You have no idea. That word that you use has nothing to do with our relationship with that word in India, in Hinduism anyhow, probably Buddhism." And that's because, I look back at it now, it's all, for us, everything's transactional, right? Surrender. What do I have to give up?
What do I get out of it?
And what am I going to get back? It's not good. I don't think it's a good bargain, And he said, the reality of what surrender is like no choice. You're not thinking about anything. You're not thinking about doing anything. It's like you're in the desert and you have no water, and you somehow, you come upon some well that's just got a little left, and that there's nothing else going on but drinking that water. There's nothing else going on but letting go of the me guy and gal, basically. So he said, you just don't understand. So this poem speaks to that. That's why, I think it's great that, and I don't even think it's me, and I'm speaking to getting something out of a poem that triggers something about how to navigate the spiritual path. It's a little bit new agey to say that, but it's easier to understand. How to really transform. And so, yeah, that's another really super important part. And talk about it in your own life, maybe some examples.
Well, I would say just what you're saying. I feel like you, Raghu, you bring that with you to the poem, right? So that, and I think with any poem, half of the poem is the poem, and a full half of the poem is the person who's coming to the poem, bringing all of their experience and their longings and their biases, so that you would find for yourself, oh, this resonance with my own spiritual practice, right?
Yeah.
Another person will read that same poem and they just got something very, very different out of it. I love
music, right?
It's just like music. It is like or like any of the art. Really, it's like all of the arts, right? Which, as Emily Dickinson says, my business is circumference. It's because we're all just trying to circle what is true, right? And then this path of circling is also some kind of a truth itself. But I think, it's been wonderful for me, the more classes that I teach in reading, and I love teaching classes where all we do is read. See, I say teach, but really what I mean is I just facilitate these classes where we get together and we read poems and we talk about them. And it's so ecstatic because in reading them together, we really do start to understand just how differently other people think, just how different their experience is. And when they bring that experience to the poem and they bring it, give voice to that, And we kind of look at them stunned, like, really? That's what you saw there? Sometimes, with shock, and sometimes with just utter admiration, like, oh yes. So it can be both these. But I this is one thing I love about when we read poems together and talk about them, and just how rich that conversation becomes because of all of the different ways that we translate it, right? And even so, we may be reading it in the same language, but we're all translating it through the lens of our own experience, and then sharing that, and that just gets so juicy and yummy. And I mean, I love it. I love what happens when we do this.
Yeah, that's so great. Boy.
Can you imagine, by the way, like, what if that was part of the election? What if instead of debates, what if we had our candidates read a poem and talk about it, right? And just wow,
good idea.
This is what sings for me, right? I'll facilitate it. I will. I will not touch the debates, but I will totally moderate the presidential candidate poetry readings. Yeah.
Well, maybe in some lifetimes from now, we'll be able to actualize something like that. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Oh my. Yeah, there's so many great poems in here. It's pretty amazing. How about, I must have a certain, picking these things must say something to you about me in terms of
it does. It's fascinating who picks which poems. It's actually fun.
Yeah, that's so great. Okay, this one's called The Prayers on page 53.
I'm glad you picked that one. Say it again, on which page?
53.
53.
We should have I think we're going to have a book club as part of what we do with ramdas.org. And it's got to have a poetry division. Can you head up our poetry division there, Rosemerry?
Yes. Why, yes, I would. I would love to do that.
All right. Well, you'll get a call one day, so hang in there.
So this poem, The Prayers, speaks about an experience that I had maybe, 16 years ago, 15 years ago, probably. And the poem kind of starts with that. It was a time when my life had really fallen apart, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was in the world anymore. Everything felt so in a state of upheaval. And so the poem kind of starts there. The Prayers. When I asked the world to open me, I did not know the price. When I wrote that 2-word prayer in the sand, I did not know loss was the key, devastation the hinge, trust was the dissolution of the idea of a door. When I asked the world to open me, I could never have said yes to what came next. Perhaps I imagined the waves knew only how to carry me. I did not imagine they would also pull me under. When I asked the world to open me, I had not imagined drowning was the way to reach the shore. The waves of sorrow dragged me down with their tides of unthinkable loss. The currents emptied my pockets and stripped me of my ideas. I was rolled and eroded and washed up on the sand like driftwood, softened. I sprawled there and wept, astonished to still be alive. It is not easy to continue to pray this way. Open me. And yet, it is the truest prayer I know. The other truest prayer, though sometimes I long to reject its truth, is thank you. Oh, friend, I really remember that day. The kids were playing. We were in the park, and my kids were playing in the sand. And I took these little stones and wrote with them, "Open me," in the sand. I have a picture of it even.
Yeah.
And I remember sharing that then with my spiritual teacher, Joy Sharp, and she said, "Oh, that is a very brave prayer." Which I really think I like I say in the poem, I would have never said yes to the things that have opened me. They're all the things that have utterly destroyed me, right? That have opened me the most. And which is why at the end I'm like, how do you say thank you for that? How do you say thank you for that? But also, how do you not say thank you for that? Because of all the growth that comes out of these most awful moments. It reminds me of my favorite poem that, kind of, when I say my favorite, I probably have, 900 favorites, but of my 900 favorites, this is one of my most favorite. It's the beginning of a poem from Gregory, and he says, not to make loss beautiful, but to make loss the place where beauty starts, where the heart understands for the first time the nature of its journey. And that is, I think, at the heart of this poem. Like, who could ever say yes to being freaking destroyed, drowned in this poem? And yet, as Isa would say, and yet.
Or as my Upaguru, which in this case was Leonard Cohen, who we've already talked about, said, yeah, it's through the crack in the heart that the light comes through. Mm-hmm. And then, and Ram Dass, suffering is, he would talk obviously a lot about suffering, because that's one of their main queries and our main concern.
Yeah.
And we talked about it with the other poem, where weaving the difficult and the unwanted with the wanted and beauty. Suffering brings me closer to God, is what he used to say. I don't ask for it, but then, having that perspective changes everything. Now, he had one of the big ones, having this massive stroke, being half paralyzed, lived through it for 22 years or something. I mean, extraordinary. And in the beginning, he used to say not just to himself, but to others, that his guru gave him the stroke, and it was Fierce Grace, which a movie was made about him that way. Yep. And he went to India. The last time he went, and he just, he ended up from there in Maui and spent the last 15 years of his life. But our Indian mother, her name is Siddhima, who was very close to Neem Karoli Baba and is a saint in her own right. They were sitting and talking, and someone had told her that Ram Dass said this. Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba gave me the stroke. It was Fierce Grace. She said, nobody's giving you any stroke. This is it's not his job here to give you a stroke. What is reality, and she didn't say anything like this, but she did say, he gave you the awareness to be able to transform your innards around this. And that's what happened to him over these years. So this is an extreme example of something you couldn't think of anything more unwanted. I mean, all he did was help people, and then all he needed after the stroke was being helped. He had to go through a massive transformation there on that. So, yeah, It's nothing to ask for, yet it is a perspective that really can transform,
Mhm. Oh
oneself.
yeah. Yeah, I think about that story of what he went through and how he did transform. Um,
Yeah.
what a beautiful way to say that too, that he gave you the grace to meet it. I just totally paraphrased you, but
Yeah. Yeah,
and I
exactly.
think that I think about, especially in those early months after Finn died, just over and over again, that was my prayer again, was open me, open me, open me. I would, you know, so many people reached out to help me, which was like a massage therapist, or I'd go see my acupuncturist, and they'd say, "What can I do?" And I'd just say, "Open me, just help me stay open.
Mm,
I just
mm,
wanted to be open. Just please help me stay
mm,
open."
mm. Oh,
Which I think in it's interesting that prayer isn't as obvious for me now, like moving through day to day life. I don't have that same thought of open me, open me, open. Maybe why don't I? Why don't I have it so present right now? But I notice that it's mostly up for me when things have super fallen apart. That's when I'm aware
yeah,
of that's the prayer that I'm
yeah,
most in touch with.
yeah, mm, yeah. I have one of my closest friends who wrote a book with Ram Dass's memoir before he left. While he was in with Ram Dass one day, I don't know how many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, he got a call from he was there and he lived in New York, upstate, Long Island rather. And his wife said that their 14-year-old daughter had just died in a car accident with not a good driver, so it was really compounded. Anyhow, he happened to be there in that moment, and I can't tell you exactly what Ram Dass said, but whatever it was, it allowed him to actually stay alive. You have a poem here about that too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, and how he used his experience, decades of doing practice and so on, to be able to hold, this is mostly what Ram Dass gave, be able to hold the horrible pain and grief alongside of who she is not separate from the body and the non-body. I
Mhm.
mean, that's just maybe a simplistic way to put it, but I think you understand. And he just managed to do that over these many years. Yeah, it's again, a lot of this is being able to take that and transform it in a way to live a dharmic life, meaning your life as what your purpose is and what you can, which is for all of us. How do we help other people? So yeah, these are major, major things. All right, another poem. 62, After the Undressing. This is fun, no? Or
This
fun
is
for me,
fun.
I don't
It's
know.
it's almost like I don't know. It's it's a little surprise. I'm like, what's it going to be? Um, I had a dream right after Finn died that I was in the dream. There was like this giant community, and we all were naked. And we did everything naked. It was not an issue. It was no problem. It's like the opposite of everybody else's naked dream. Like in my naked dream, it was the best thing that could ever happen. We were all just walking around naked, doing dishes or doing laundry or like going to work, whatever it was. And then I had to do something else. And I went through this door and I found myself in the land of people wearing clothes. And I realized that they were really uncomfortable with me being naked. And I was really uncomfortable with them wearing clothes. So I did whatever it was I had to do. And I went back as fast as I could to the land of the naked people, which when I woke up, I thought, well, obviously this is really metaphorical, that in that state of raw grief that we are so naked. And it is really hard to be around other people who are not so vulnerable. So this is exploring what comes out of that world. After the undressing, I had thought I was already naked. I had thought I had shed the mask, the robe, the dress, the flimsy garments that tease. I thought I had nothing left to remove. Then came slipping out of my laugh, taking off my smile, dropping my role, my hope, losing what I thought I knew. I could never have said yes to this. It happened anyway. I am less myself, only more. There is a shawl of compassion, though, its threads made of sunrise gold. This. Whoever does the undressing wraps me now in this.
That's very great. Whoever does the undressing.
That whatever that great hand is, whether they're the one, giving you the stroke, the one that takes the child. But, I think that this was something, I think, beyond just the taking off the first layers of self, right? But just to go through past that, like all the way past whatever we think we know. Grief does that to us, right? Grief completely takes it all off. It just takes it all off to the point where you can't anything. And then the love. I mean, I guess I remember feeling so shredded of all ability, of all agency. And then I also remember just being so held, so carried by love. That it was so physically present. It felt so physically there for me. Like literally, I felt like I was being held. Like I had this sense of like a great hand just squeezing my chest all the time. And I remember one day I said something about it to someone. I was like, I don't know what it is. Like I wake up and it's there. Like I go to bed and it's there. I wake up and it's there. And then one day I woke up and it was gone. This was after a few weeks. I was like, oh my God, where'd it go? And it came back and it didn't leave for months.
Yeah. That's so great. Oh, by the way, I forgot something in that story of what Ram Dass was told, but thinking that he was being given this by this being. She said, it was just nature.
Yeah.
Nature. And that's also what this speaks to. And that comes. Now, we're part of nature. And in Ram Dass's case, of course, that was very much part of what happened. He let go of certain things, taking care of himself in certain ways. But there's so many different levels to it. I mean, he became who he was pointing to after the stroke. All those years and embodying it many's a time, but after the stroke it was completely something else. He, the edict he had was love everyone and tell the truth. And he got as close as any human I ever met could get there without being a Maharaji or whatever, an enlightened being. So, yeah. Now, Rosemerry, can I read a poem?
Will you please read a poem?
And
it's so great.
I I think you probably know it, but it's Kabir, the 16th century, I think, mystic. And it's a beautiful little book by Thomas Rain Crow, Painting from the Palette of Love, it's called. Just a little, I don't know how, I get sometimes books, it's wonderful. So this poem is called Faith. Where are you looking for me? I am with you, my friend. Not in prayers or meditations, not in fasting, not in yogic postures, not in renunciation, not in New Age books or even in the body, and not even in infinite space, not in the womb of nature, not in the breath inside the breath. So seek and search sincerely. It will only take you a second. Kabir says, listen to what I say. Where your trust resides, it is there that you will find your God.
Wow.
Great
Where trust resides.
Yeah. And you allude to it in poems throughout the book, I think, more than once. And whenever I bring that up, every gathering we have, retreat, and no matter what, bring it up with whoever it is I'm speaking with, and podcast trust is what led me. In my case, I trusted Ram Dass when I first met him, and it led me to trust my own intuition, and and my world opened up because of that. So I suggested everybody, and it comes through many different avenues, all the way from a poem to a psychedelic, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I think once you've experienced it in one realm, maybe we experience it more easily in another. I mean, I think that it takes just that one little window of learning how to trust, and then it's possible again. Like I think it's almost impossible until you've had some experience of it at all, right? And I don't know how to say you fostered that first experience. I have no idea.
Grace
but
happens.
I do know that grace
happens.
It's grace.
You meet somebody, you read a poem, you read a book, and then something ineffable happens.
That's so right.
And then from there, you can foster that. You can cultivate it.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful too? In that poem you just read, how Kabir, I'm with you, right? Not here, not here, not here, not here.
Mm.
But I think about that a lot, just about how we're all, all of us the same stuff, all of us the same experience, all of us, whatever it is, it's in us all. And
exactly.
And then just that. So what's the difference between, it is that trust. It's just that trust, or that. And then what does trust take? It takes willingness. Maybe that openness that I was talking about before, that willingness, openness.
Courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been a well-spent hour, Rosemerry.
I can't believe it's been an hour. How could that be?
Yeah, it is.
That was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, no, very much so. Wait. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, here's the cover of the book. Beautiful cover, The Unfolding. And we're going to have links. When you go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, you'll see a link, and you'll be able to, not only can you, oh God, I had a whole other poem that you sent me the other day. Next time, really, with the bunnies, that was really great. You remember the bunnies?
They have been saving me, the bunnies.
Really?
Yeah. They really have. My relationship with the bunnies has been a big teacher for me. Yeah.
Well, that'll be a surprise for next time. But thanks for being here, Rosemerry.
Oh, thank you.
And I was going to say, you can sign up, and there'll be a link to to your website, right? And just go on Rosemerry Trommer.com?
Rosemerry. Yeah, it's rosemerry.com, but you just have to spell it the way my name is my two grandmothers, Rose and Mary. And the Mary is spelled like she spelled it, Merry. So rosemerry.com.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll have that. And you can sign up and get one every day, which is fantastic. So everybody, we shall see you next week. And this is Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network. Bye, Rosemerry.
Thank you.